Oh, that's good. It made a thumbnail automatically. Okay. Let's see how loud this is, if I can talk over it. It shouldn't be too loud. Is if I can talk. Okay. Let's see how loud this is, if I can talk over it. It shouldn't be too loud. Alright, yeah, that should be good. Okay, I'm not really setting this up to be a live stream. It's more like something that you're gonna come back to. But because the video that I wanted to make covering this, I couldn't because my phone wouldn't let me. The storage on it, it just everything. It took up most of my storage and it just wouldn't let me export the video. So even though I wanted this to be more artistic and like, you know, an introduction video would be, I can't do that. I'm gonna have to do the live stream. So Turtle Pond was originally a joke name for like if I was to ever have a band. Hence this like album cover artwork. It would be like a self-titled album artwork thing or an EP kind of thing. And it was like it was stupid. Basically, it's like or Animal and Friends or like Farm Frenzy, like something like that. Like the lead singer would have like a turtle mask, and the others would be dressed up as other animal characters with like other masks. Um, like I said, this is a prototype cover. Uh, Nothing else to really say. I'll cover like the title and everything in the end. That's a really important segment. But let's move on to the tracks. So the first track, "Explosion in Los Angeles," was originally made like before even the idea of slapping Turtle Pond on it. It was background music for one of my episodes that I did about like dreams and nightmares. And the main inspiration for this was like Inception music watered down, because it that you know Inception, dreams, nightmares. I thought that like perfect vibe go with someone like that's like Inception, but like slowed down, watered down, and still sounding like cinematic style, like cinematic quality. I think we'll move on to the next one. This one has an interesting story behind it. Um, when I created this, it was back when I was still in my second semester of 11th grade, and that was during when COVID happened, and I was doing my work online. Uh, it was a rainy day, and I was doing a math assignment, and I was anxious about the math assignment, and I was kind of like, this was kind of like when I started like trying to write music that expresses my feelings. So it was like, let's go with every time I think of like a rainy day kind of music, I always think of like indie kind of like really like maybe psychedelic sounding guitars and like piano, maybe like violins kind of even as well. But for this, I was like, nah, I kind of want to do like a grunge, watered down, post-hardcore, even like kind of punk sounding thing. Hence the description, like I wrote this on a rainy day while listening to Seisha and having an anxiety attack. Perfect sounding for it. Really dark and kind of almost like depressing and like in a very atmospheric way. And that was my main intent for that. artwork was inspired by, like, I don't even know what it was really inspired by. It was mostly like I was thinking of like maybe what like a Seisha art or an album cover or something would look like. I thought this was a good look for it, and I thought it fit perfectly. All right, I'll move on to the next one. Still one of my personal favorite artworks to this day. This was just strictly indie inspired. Don't remember why I made this. I think it was just experimenting with different genres. While the others were slowed down, this one is at normal speed. And the I can't. I was definitely really. I was listening to Moose Blood at this time, and I love Turnover. I was listening to. I definitely listened to Turnover before I started making this, but yeah, you know, it has like that kind of Midwest emo indie like title to it, Days You Can't Get Back. The artwork was done in GTA. This is a GTA. This is a spot in GTA if you can find it. It's near. It's actually, ironically, it's near the one of the next ones that we're gonna get to. But it's yeah, the road. That filter was used in this program actually, Share Factory, and I thought that it reminded. I've never seen an artwork that looks like this, like for an album cover or for a cover in general. So I just thought, you know, this looks kind of different and this looks very independent. So I went with that. Uh, Nothing really to add. I added there's a guitar segment at this part that I just thought it seems kind of out of place, but it also kind of reminds me of my youth. I mentioned Guitar Hero in the description for this, and I thought it went well with it. Next one is a very. This is just pure experimental. Blue Crater Under the Moon. This was when I kind of. This is when I wanted to take things in a new direction. Specifically 200 speed with 6 instruments playing at once. The idea of it was like Metal Gear Solid, or not Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance like soundtrack, mixed with like maybe like I don't know, like so like a boss fight to like a Nintendo game of some kind. I don't. It was kind of like those two on the fences. Uh, it sounds like something that I've never heard before. So again, pure experimental. It's I personally enjoy listening to it like just playing a game or something. Like it's loud and fast and energetic enough that um, it keeps me going while I'm playing. Well, nothing really else to say about this. If you can guess the two pictures fused together here, I'd be a little bit surprised. But this was like pure actual Photoshop. So if you can guess those two pictures, I'm gonna be surprised. Especially the ship, if you know where the ship is from. Alright, we're on to the next one. During the time I made this one, I heard Your Arms Are My Cocoon for the first time, and I wanted to make like the bedroom pop screamo combination. And to me, to this day, it sounds like N64 music underwater, and that was like actually the original title. Um, Nothing really to add. Like, I mean, it sounds like Mario 64, maybe Donkey Kong Country, and uh, other games from that time that like it just sounds like the music's been played underwater. For experimental purposes, I tried to do like the lo-fi thing, like bedroom pop. Uh, and honestly, it sounds like old school Nintendo music underwater. And that was the vibe I went with. I went with like dreamy, atmospheric. For the cover, it's like it was like trying to match that. Actually, I used for the inspiration for this cover was kind of like how the if anybody knows the intro of like Skins UK, like with the effects with like the wavy effects of like the backgrounds and stuff like that. I was kind of going for that vibe actually. It does definitely for to me it gives me like a 2007 early 2000 vibe to the cover at least. All right, this one is one that a lot of people forget about. I don't know anybody that's ever mentioned this when it comes to my music, but we got Nowhere Road, specifically created for my Following Your Dreams video. This was designed specifically to fit like the driving around in a muscle car around Los Santos vibe, and the whole everything about it is to reflect that when you're stuck in life and you don't know where to go. That's basically the entire premise. The artwork is GTA, and if you can guess the other game, like with the lava, again, I'd be surprised. And I use some country-esque vibes to this, along with some interesting choices with the drums at certain sections. Again, it's supposed to really make you feel like, you know, you're a part of the video, like you are driving around not knowing where to go. Uh, Not really a whole lot else to say. Um, I think this was maybe the first time I slapped on a watermark. For this, maybe? I think so. Oh yeah, I also used some ambient stuff to it as well, which I think sounds amazing. Reminds me kind of Dead Space or just like those drama shows from like the 2000s. Maybe even just like Stargate Atlantis a little bit as well. Yeah, I think that's another sound that kind of sounds like to me. All right, next one is a really important one within TurtlePond catalog and also the important piece of my life. Uh, I've covered a little bit about the situation of this, but basically, what I'm just gonna say it is that this was a part of my life that I was genuinely scared, and it was at the case of like not knowing what was gonna happen that I used like my what I would normally like what I'd use as my coping mechanism to write lyrics. I kind of channeled that energy to create the music that I wanted to create that reflects how I felt, which was like guilt, scared, and just anxious. And I think this is my second favorite track that I ever created. The first one isn't released yet, but it'll be released under a different music project at some point, maybe this year or next year. That I think blows this one slightly out of the water just a bit. But yeah, the overall inspiration for this was actually at the beginning of it was a little bit kind of like Red Dead Redemption. And then the others was just to have an uplifting moment and then have a full-on breakdown with hard step at the end. Some people ask why I use the hard step. The hard step is to reflect that the track couldn't end on an orchestral because yeah, I have a freak out and then it just abruptly ends on a good note. That's not how I wanted this to sound. I wanted this to reflect how I actually felt, which this track perfectly demonstrates going through the motions of an event you either know about or like you're experiencing, like grief. Grief is a perfect example. I would listen to this if I was going through grief. And the album work was I wanted the album work to be or not the album work the I wanted the artwork to be special. So I took a picture from when I was young and I was holding my sister, um, and then I wanted it to look dark and add like some dispersion effects, but I also wanted it to look still semi, like I didn't want it to be uncomfortable like the Korn self-titled cover, but I wanted it to be uncomfortable like in a, this can be looked at as beautiful in one light and scary in another, hence the entire sound of this track. I think I said enough about that. We're going to be moving on to my, probably one of my least favorite tracks, and that would be, everybody knows this one. This one is when I got fed up with working with guitars because I didn't know where to go. But this was also before like my experimental stage, and actually, if I remember correctly, yeah, this is a pretty short track. But the overall inspiration for this was supposed to be strictly Things That Rhyme with Orange by Set My Friends on Fire, and it ended up turning into classic rock mixed with Motion City soundtrack, I would say, along with some other elements. Strictly, I just, it was basically a statement, be like, hey, here's another fast track, but I'm done with guitars. And I think that fits the overall aesthetic. Cover is pretty obvious enough. Bulldozer running over guitars with destroyed guitars at the bottom. And I was like, you know, screw it. Strap my friggin' watermark on, like, big size. Overall, just definitely a skip in the catalog, but it's also, I guess, fun the first time you listen to it. Now we're going to move on to probably one of the biggest projects, if not the second biggest in my, which is my EP. This EP was pretty much inspired by something that Finn McKenty said, which is you can't make a metal album based on Formula F1 racing. This is basically the lazy version of my lazy response to that. Obviously, you know, no vocals or anything to do with racing aside from the cover and the samples. Which actually, this was one of the first times I used samples, and it is an idea that I'm going to be using in the future. But the one guy that I think it's the first sample. The first sample I use is actually my grandfather talking over it. Main vibe for this was stoner metal, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure post metal, stoner metal. No, that this is from Ford versus Ferrari actually. The other one though. The overall the overall idea of this EP is basically getting ready for a race, crash, and then the end of the race or the victory of the race, which is I actually was more use Ford versus Ferrari as the entire inspiration for this album than I did actual F1 racing. The picture taken in the middle of it was done on Project Cars 2, and then obviously put a filter, and then I added some other pictures to make it look like give some 90s vibes to it. But yeah, I guess we'll move on to the singles and then the album. Alright, story behind this one. There's not really a whole lot to say. This was originally planned for the album, and then I decided to cut it because it felt both out of place on this album and on my next music project that I decided to just release it. This was, ironically enough, what inspired me to make this track actually inspired me to make the next two albums coming for my next music project, or the same person that inspired me to create both. Um, Title is a reflection of someone, and the overall sound was basically just to kind of capture this person's personality and turn it into music. Uh, the cover was inspired by like Taylor Swift. I just thought about like a white Mustang and like the white getup. The reason why I actually have the bushes like kind of covering the leg is that I picked the wrong pants for her, or for the character, and there's actually a white stripe going down, which I felt looked out of place. That's why I wanted to cover it as much as possible. I still really like this picture. There's actually another picture I had in mind, but I went with what everybody else thought would look good, so yeah, here's like and I also used like some Stranger Things for the Stranger Things like sound work, such as like certain keys and stuff like that. So I kind of also wanted to have that Stranger Things tint over it. But yeah, not really a whole lot else to say. The album that reflects my, or that's based on this person or the albums are going to be incredible and will blow this out of the water. So this was just a release, which will actually brings me to my next track, also known as the last track I ever released for this project. Yeah. We got sad cyberpunk doomer-esque music to cry to. This one is also a cut from my next upcoming project, because I started to listen to it more, and I started to, it didn't sit right with me to have it on there, so I just thought, hey, you know what, I'm gonna release it. And I was debating on, should I release this under TurtlePond or should I release this under my next project's name? And I overall went with TurtlePond, but this sounds like aging TurtlePond to the point where it's getting to switching up to my next project, so I went with this. The style of, I don't know which genre of music this is. I think it's specifically called Cyberpunk, but the instrumentals that is working with, I was like, I don't know how to work with this so let's just do Blade Runner. And the original title for this is No, I Do Not Want to Watch Blade Runner. I think this sounds kind of like Blade Runner mixed with like Total Recall and Fifth Element and whatever is classified as cyberpunk or whatever. But kind of an inspiration for this was Mama Max, like just the the music that he uses, like whatever the music, and like the Hotline Miami vibe also has role in this. The main cover, I wanted it to reflect cyberpunk, but also to keep in mind of my next music project, which is very much inspired by MySpace pop, specifically like Play Radio Play, Owl City, Hello Goodbye, or those things. So I was kind of going for also like a MySpace vibe with this cover as well. I think it reflects each element, through the music, through the cover, and yeah, I think I did a pretty good job with the overall. I The thing is, though, I don't really appreciate this track, and it might grow on me like others that I've listened to that I created. But if anything, this is probably going to be a second to I'm so done with guitars. Now we'll move on to the album, which I think everybody's been waiting for. So, for this album, the overall inspiration for it is essentially like just dark moments and well, actually no, just important moments in my life in general. Actually, let's see if the volume is see if that's taken over what I'm saying or if it's not loud enough. I think it's probably loud enough, but let's just see. Are you kidding me? We got bots in the live streams? Like, I understand if we have bots in YouTube videos, but really bots in live streams? Whatever is classified as Cyberpunk or whatever. But, kind of an inspiration for this was Mama Max. Like, just. So, okay, it's loud for me, but it's not loud for the live stream, so I guess we'll continue. Okay. So the overall inspiration for this was, yeah, basically just important moments in my life. I hit a point where I struggled with like knowing what to do, even though like everything was basically kind of given to me. Like, I graduated high school, I got accepted into college, and it was like I was kind of like contemplating like what the hell is going on. Like this was before I entered college, and the someone important in my life. Well, I don't consider I can't really say important, but like someone that is that has a really important place like within my entire life. Uh, Things didn't really end up going well with them, and they ghosted me. And like this is the overall like I don't know. Uh, the overall takeaway from this album is that the overall experience for this album is regardless of how things go in your life and you want to quit, you want to give up, eventually you stick around, things will get better. And that's kind of how the overall layout of this album works. So the artwork is to reflect on like while you're going in the future, moments fade. That's kind of the overall takeaway from this. So we'll get into tracks. What you're hearing right now is The Crash. Every time I talk about my life or anything involving me, if I was to make a movie, a documentary about my life, first thing that I mention is my father's car accident, which happened a couple months after I was born, and the effect that it had on him when he got better eventually and he decided to leave. This is a four-part. The four tracks at the beginning of this album reflect that. Hence, The Crash, near-death experience is coming up, and the overall sound for The Crash was supposed to be like 2000s rock, and then turns into like music you would expect to be played during a car accident. The near-death experience is supposed to be like a dreamy vibe, like specifically the only thing I could really think of would be like Heaven is for Real. That was kind of the inspiration I used, like that kind of music that you would hear playing if you were to see God, if you were to feel like a ghost, basically. Um, Not really a whole lot to say. I mean, I was thinking more like heaven slash and the near-death experience, what you would think to hear during a near-death experience, like while your mind is playing and going through the motions. Let's move on to Thank You, Satan. One of my personal favorites. The title comes from a quote from Uber Danger's Diddy Kong 64 racing video. And the overall sound is supposed to be like Dante's Inferno, God of War, very Satan, hellhole-ish type of music. I think I also use like Rise of 300 as an example for like the really like things are dark, things are deep, and like basically like making um essentially like making a deal with Satan. That's kind of like the overall aesthetic, the overall vibe from this. Uh it's more or less just a commentary on like what my father became after the accident. And hence we fall into Leave Your Wife and Children, which is the dad rock anthem. That's what I like to think of. Basically just 90s, 80s, 2000s rock that dads would listen to all together. Uh, and honestly, I think my original title was Anthem to Leave Your Wife and Children to, or something like that. But overall, it really covers that vibe, that is the whole anything. Basically it would be on like, now that's what I call dad rock. I think I think it was well made. Not really a whole lot of takeaways. I really like the breakdown in this. Um, Definitely, I would definitely recommend showing this to your dad. I think that he would like it. And we move on to another personal favorite, Hanging Out with the Boys That Left After 2010. This is essentially, this is a reflection off of a photograph slash vivid moment in my life where when I was younger I played street hockey with these kids in the neighborhood, and there's a photograph of that very moment of like just us playing, and I always like think back to that because I've never saw them, never even heard some of their names were actually kind of weird as well, and I've never like ever heard those names ever used again. The first part was supposed to sound like pop punk, and it just ends up sounded like experimental pop rock MySpace. And then after it turns into like dance punk. Like the only thing I could think of at the time was like Killers, Block Party, kind of. I not really good with like remembering names like Yeah Yeahs. And then the ending is supposed to be Linkin Park, specifically New Divide Linkin Park, and it sounds more like futuristic rock than anything. Uh, I was not trying to sound like Bring Me Horizon because I can't stand that band, and I was using Linkin Park as the example of that track. And we'll move on to, for some reason, everybody loves this track on SoundCloud. I really don't get it. This is your indie rock love anthem that you would hear used in a cheesy indie movie like Paper Towns, Garden State, whatever you can think of, basically. That was the overall inspiration. The meaning behind, or the what it caused me to make this was a weird moment in my life, kind of like the photograph moment, but with a girl. Like hung out for a day and then she moved the next day, and she's like, I didn't even know that she existed really previously until that day. Um, yeah, not really a whole lot to mention. I was just going for anything indie rock, indie pop. Can't think of any other thing to really go with it. Basically, like, it's just supposed to sound indie. Maybe the closest thing I could think of is like maybe like an example, like before any indie movie that I saw would be the American Dad indie episode, like independent film. I think that's what it was called. Amazing. It's I kind of have a love-hate relationship with indie because indie can be cringy at sometimes, but when I mean cringy, I mean like kind of just same old, same old. But at the same time, I really appreciate it, especially like indie Midwest emo. But on the other rights, like on the other side, like Mumford and Sons, which I'm pretty sure this kind of sounds like, or what was the other one? Lumineers. I can't really listen to those, but I love like Cage the Elephant, Modest Mouse, Moose Blood, anything to come out of the um, Run for Cover records, even though those are kind of different, but you know what I mean. Uh, yeah, I don't understand why everybody loves this so much. I mean, if I know there's a lot of people that appreciate indie music, but I feel like this is just bottom of the barrel standardness, so I don't really know what to say. Up next is probably my favorite on the album. If you know this one, Bullied Through Elementary School, the anthem to being bullied in elementary school. Title is pretty self-explanatory. My idea for this was to actually use music from what I was listening to in elementary school, which kind of would have sounded like other tracks on here. And then I thought, you know what? I'm gonna ask people what what genres they find annoying, and make it sound horrible. And to me, I think it sounds so bad it's good. Specifically, like TikTok music. In the case of making like flute whistles covers and stuff like that. And that was the overall. What I wanted this to sound like was band practice, with also people, or with also like high schoolers trying to recreate their favorite genres, but their favorite genres are annoying, like I don't know, samba, or whatever else was on there. Like there were some pop rock vibes. This section is still my favorite. The friggin' plucking is just sounds like, it sounds so much like as someone hears Smashing Pumpkins for the first time, and then you have other people trying to recreate like Metallica riffs at the same time, and it's just, I love this track so much. And then I added dubstep at the end just to put the cherry on top of the sundae. Not really a whole lot else to say. It's my favorite track. Then we're getting into, I don't understand why it's definitely a TikTok anthem. It could definitely be used on TikTok. Then we're getting into probably my second favorite, if not third. Stacy's my favorite Daria character. The second song about another person, about a person that will be reoccurring. Nothing really a whole lot to say. I mean, it's a reflection, or it's inspired by those stupid moments in films and movies, where the character has a daydreaming sequence of their crush, like whenever they see their crush for the first time, and that's the overall aesthetic of this. I was like thinking of kind of like Bridge to Terabithia, like Spiderwick Chronicles, Narnia. Also reflects the person, what I think the person enjoys. And then I added in some jazz influences because that also kind of highlights the character as well. Honestly, I just love how spot on this is, like, to highlight the moment that I did see this person for the first time. And I think it's a really good track. Would I listen to it constantly? No. I would save that for some upcoming ones, like this one. This one is ninth grade was forgettable. Oh, also I should mention that Stacy's my favorite Daria character. That is Stacy from Daria is kind of has the resemblance of the person, and that's kind of why that's why I use that name. Um, Ninth grade was forgettable is the interlude before the interlude, which is a MySpace early or late 2000s rock pop mixed with alternative rap sequence that I think I did a really good job on. It really highlights that era, I think, and just everything mashed together. I think it sounds great. Also added some maybe dubstep stuff into it as well, but not really a whole lot. The ninth grade was forgettable, and there was nothing really memorable about ninth grade, so that's why I named it that. And I just used the my forgettable. I asked people like what they find, what music genre do they can't really they think is hard to get into, but other people like, and they gave me certain ones like pop rock was one of them. I don't remember the others. I'm sure there was like synth pop or something in there as well. All right, we're moving on to the interlude, which is probably my favorite interlude because, even though I might be biased because I created this, but stealing a newspaper basket from an overrated cafe. Title comes from an actual thing that happened, hanging out with some friends, and one of them decided to do that at Tim Hortons. The overall sound of it is to be like a mixture between Stacy is my favorite Daria character, another upcoming track we'll get to, and but also having its own thing to it, like some pop dance and 80s rock vibes to it, or sorry, yacht rock, 80s yacht rock vibes to it a little bit as well. I couldn't really think of like what would I call this, and like how, even if I named it that, like how would I create create music that highlights that moment, like, it's just, it almost sounds like an impossible thing, so I just made an interlude. Interlude was not the first idea on. I actually didn't even think about making an interlude. Like, this just turned into an interlude while I was creating it. I guess we'll move on to a serious one, depression. This one specific, you probably won't even be able to hear this because this is a really quiet track. But the overall, well, the moment that inspired this was obviously when I was depressed. And then the other components to this, like why I decided to go with a dark ambient route, is normally when you see videos that are about spreading awareness about depression, they always use dark ambience or dark scenery, and that's kind of, I use that for if the moment that I started, before a lot of shit happened, when I was depressed, I would think about like what music would be playing over that moment, and this perfectly highlights it. And actually, I do use this as a reference for stuff I decide to create in the future that goes for a more dark sounding theme, because this is also using lo-fi, which I don't really like using a whole lot because I feel like it doesn't really add a whole lot to it aside from making it sound claustrophobic, which it does a really good job at. Alright, I think we'll move on to probably probably like this one I prefer to listen to over Stacy's my favorite Daria character, and the interlude. Finding Hope is, I think, a really well done track in the sense of creating that motivational slow building moment in life that you do find hope, you do find redemption. The what really the moment that I tried to recreate this for was when I saw, not met, saw my best friend for the first time. It was at a pep rally. I was listening. She had a My Chemical Romance shirt, and I was listening to Understanding in a Car Crash by Thursday, and I just felt like that was a really important moment. But I used Stacy as my favorite Daria character as like the kind of a little bit as a like influence to like use a dream sequence, but also have in some up a little bit more moving instruments like I decided to go with like a funk jazz route because that's slow, but it slowly moves the track rather than just going strictly with the dream sequence. The overall um the overall like takeaway from this, I would say, is like I could easily see this being used in a Christmas movie, like just from when someone leaves the house to driving to the other location, like just driving and in the winter at night, hearing this play. I could easily hear that. Um, think we're done with that. We'll move on to the next one, which is, in my opinion, I consider this to be the unofficial remix of If Obsessiveness Won't Kill Me. This one specifically is inspired by the person that, or the Stacy's my favorite Daria character, and like behind the channel, I mentioned this before, but like when I wanted to start writing and I wanted to create a story, I did talk to that person and ask them for like help. However, it was like I knew that I was kind of doing the wrong thing because like that's not really what I wanted to say to the person. That whole thing was not something I really cared about. It was more like actually just being able to talk to that person. And the gave me two things to take away, and one of them was a Sims example of like, watch what you say to people, because not everybody wants to hear like you talk about your mental illness. And the other one is like, and the other one was like, writing is subjective. And that's what I use for this. This is basically taking the beautiful, dark, and kind of hauntingly instrumentals from If Obsessiveness Won't Kill Me, and putting them together with dance and acid music, which kind of makes it into its own thing. And it's, it's art is subjective, and that's what I went with. I don't really understand what electronica is, so I just use that as an example of like, all right, that's what electronica is. Let me see if I can make electronica. And this is not electronica, but this sounds good, and this sounds original and creative. So, yeah, there's not really a whole lot else to say about that. The next one is kind of not really like the, I wouldn't say it's like the, if Love at First Sight does exist, but this one is specifically inspired by, as it says in the title, a happy moment in my life. And this, before the events that encouraged me to create the ending track happen, this was the happiest moment in my life was graduating. And I always refer to, it's always high school movies, indie movies, where the high schoolers graduate and or something big happens that in a good way before the movie ends. There's always that uplifting music. And for this I went with like my happiest moment in life was graduating high school. And regardless of, if if COVID didn't happen and the amount of stuff I could have cleared up at the graduation, uh, it's still a happy moment in my life. And I went for a Donkey Kong Country vibe to it because, every other happy sounding music sounds the same. I was like, let's do Donkey Kong Country for the hell of it. Um, Specifically, like the vibe I was getting is being in a car with your family and being on your DS playing something. Uh, that's kind of what I. It was a really good moment, and I think it's an interesting take on it. The whole happiest moment in my life music. Now we'll move on to the ending track, which for some reason is the most popular for the album on YouTube. This is a very important track. So something I never released publicly was that I ended up getting, well, I had to go through a process of pretty much writing my life story in order to get a bursary. But it turns out that I actually ended up receiving the most high-valued bursary, and it was an incredible moment. So what I did was, rather than thinking about the happiness of getting the bursary, I went with creating the exact moment in time, what it felt like to get the news. And it wasn't a sunny day. It was actually gonna rain. It was gray, and I was also thinking about how my dad would react to it, because if he wouldn't show emotion to it, then I'd been like kind of pissed. But no, everything went well, and it was an amazing moment, and it was a movie moment. It was like the movie's gonna end, but it ends on a good moment. I went for like a Deftones. I was trying to go for like a Deftones vibe at the beginning of it, and then I used some Hollywood, like uplifting violin classical music, and then I used some vintage rock weird sounds, like to kind of like highlight that it's kind of like it's distorted, because this is an incredible moment in my life, but it's not the best moment in my life. It's not the happiest moment in my life, and that's hence the distortedness, to remind me that I don't have all my focus on this event, that there's other important things, but this is also, you got to remember this, because this is huge. So I think now we will get to the title, or the name. Where does it come from? Kind of a reoccurring theme, but the person that inspired me to create those two tracks, the person that really got me to go out of my way and create this, the person that honestly got me, or made me realize and change my way I present myself, the way how I speak to people, the way how I actually got friends, the way how I managed to communicate with people in college. That's the person that encouraged me to create this, or I made the name TurtlePond as as my interpretation of a quote that they had on their Instagram. It was something to do with, it sounded like something to do with snails, and I was going with I thought, well, maybe turtles would be a good would be close enough, and I went with pond because turtles in water. The original thing was Turtle Park, and I just thought, you know what? I like the having music, or I like having the aquatic vibe to the natural vibe as well, not just green. And when you go back to where it all started, it really makes me think that this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the music. This is where things are going to change in the future, especially with the next project is going to blow you out of the water, because this is going to be what I took from Turtle Pond, I made it my own thing with this next project. And this next project is going to be huge. We're going to be doing, hopefully, we're going to try to get a music video for every track of the first album. And then the second album, we're going to be, uh, music videos will relate to other music videos. And even the music is just going to be a whole other sound. No vocals. That's going to be saved for a way in the future project. But this is going to be the next big moment in in my take on music and in people that enjoy my music. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the music. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for the support. Thank you for at least sharing this with people that you think would like it. Thank you for pretty much encouraging me to create what I wanted to create and show people the type of music that I want to create. And just, I really appreciate just the massive encouragement, like, to continue making music. Like, it's just, there's not a whole lot to say. Like, I feel like I'm just gonna keep repeating the same stuff. So, like, I think that's all. I think I covered everything. Peace.